Although we say that we have 7 bodies, it's only the 7th body that really counts. Do you recognize that your real body is the universe itself? The self that is pure awareness dreams the entire cosmos as a single whole from beginning to end, in timeless presence. And then the universe experiences its self-awareness in every form that appears within that universe. So first it creates the entire tapestry as the Mahasutratma. But then it sends the threads that compose the tapestry through time to crisscross with one another and with each kairos moment when there is an awakening as a new epoch, a new dispensation, a new realization emerges that produces a different form of artistry, a different form of self-expression. And so in each lifetime that is represented in the Sutratma's journey through the tapestry of time, it composes a new form of its own artwork, which is the expression of its life and its work and its beauty. And it may be expressed in a formal art like music or drama or painting or cinematography, depending on what technologies are available in that kairos moment. But it is always seeking that expression of its own unfathomable being that emerges in the form of its awareness of its own body as the universe. But it is aware of it in the form of mystery. And it is that mystery then that is shared in the realization of the awesomeness of the experience of being able to see God by the simple act of looking in one another's eyes. Because each body created by the Sutratma is a microcosm of God itself. And then within the Sutratma, all of the sheaths, beginning with the Anandamaya Kosha, that is capable of realizing that bliss and holding the light of the divine presence, even if only in deep sleep, and yet yearning always to be able to hold it in full wakefulness. And in every lifetime creating some religion in which its own inner light is expressed as a light that it can worship, whether a light over an ark of a Torah or a light in a Zoroastrian fire temple, or the light of the Christ consciousness within the Sacred Heart, or in any other form of that eternal radiance that we are, but that because we are destined to forget it, we must remind ourselves with religious punctuality of arrival at a place of worship that becomes the temple that serves as a proxy for our realization that our bodies are the temples of God. And thus each body, from the light body of the Anandamaya Kosha to the wisdom body of the Vijnanamaya Kosha, that can symbolically understand the nature of God and plumb the mystery with signifiers that can portray the archetypal mystery in a form that can be grokked by the intelligence itself. And then on into the Manomaya Kosha, that is able to put into words that can be woven into poetry, that form that can be expressed in the form of relationality, in the form of love, in the form of care and compassion. And then, as it works its way into the Pranamaya Kosha, is able to transmit the pure electrical energy of divine life and transmit that in the form of healing, in the form of awakening, in the form of Shaktipat, in the form of the sharing of the electricity, the body electric, as Walt Whitman sang of it in Leaves of Grass, that electric body that is too powerful for us to remember. And so we create these ego minds as what Gurdjieff called the kunda buffer, so we don't have to feel all that kundalini energy that will shatter the ego when it finally is released fully into consciousness. And then all of that enfolded within the body of flesh and blood and bone that is unaware of its own divine nature and yet carries its genetic composition of that divine intelligence in every cell. And thus we are divine from top to bottom, from cosmos to microcosm to quantum, and in every level we transmit the energy of a vibrational frequency of eternal radiance. And yet the ego mind is completely unaware of the supreme thermonuclear dynamite on which it is sitting, because each body has the power to explode into another universe, another dream of that God consciousness that can emerge from any being who is lit on fire with the awesome realization of its true nature. And what is even more awesome is the total unawareness of every ego of its massive power to shine as a new cosmos at any and every moment, because it is already that. It is already all seven bodies, and that body of bone and flesh is only the very least of its manifestations. May we be free of the limitation of a mind that cannot grok its true infinite nature, because it's afraid of its own infinite energy. It's afraid of its unlimited power. It's afraid of the fact that it cannot grasp or control itself, and that it is always in the hands of the living God, to which one can only surrender, or else be deaf and dumb and blind to the true power and bliss of what we are. And that's too big a price to pay. The one thing no one wants to lose is consciousness. That's why there is fear of death. And yet the ego doesn't know that death actually liberates the consciousness back into its infinite dimensionality, and that the ego itself is the death of real consciousness that is forced into a dungeon of fantasies of inadequacy and desire and fear, of what is only its own phantasm that has no reality whatsoever, nor does the ego's own identity, except as a dream within a dream within a dream that is destined to be a nightmare from which one wants to awaken, but is too terrified of the energies that awakening will produce. And so it pretends it wants to adapt to an ordinary world and be an ordinary person, and yet it knows its extraordinary nature. But because it cannot know it fully, it must know it in the form of narcissistic systems of false superiority, covered over in the inferiority of its own guilt that it has failed itself by refusing to know its true nature, because it would be alone. It would be so different from everyone else that it could never be understood. It would be alone as God is alone, as the real self is always reveling in its aloneness, because it is all one with all that has ever been or shall be, and needs no other, nor wants any other, because an other is a border, a boundary, a limitation, a lack of wholeness. And so the ego wants to dominate the other and make it its slave so it can pretend it has no other. But that too fails, because one's slave becomes one's master. And it's in this terrible Morbius strip in which the id takes over from the ego, and all is ruled by passions that lead only to death and self-devastation, that can only be escaped by the full acceptance of our infinite life that doesn't need a body, doesn't need a mind, because that's only a limitation of its power of knowledge. And what it needs only is the silent presence of the purity of being, to be released once more into its transcosmic absolute bliss. And at this Kairos moment, it is decreed, it is written, that all shall be released from every prison of every body, including the seventh body, back into that unmanifest presence of absence that becomes the ultimate self-realization of God. So that everyone who thinks they are an I will know that God as the one self that they are. May everyone be ready for this explosion into the real.